So, studying the Parsha of Shoftim, Judges. A lot of mitzvahs in this week's Parsha, starting with the discussion of judges and of witnesses and of kings and of prophets and many different financial laws, the laws of the levirate marriage, and some of the laws of warfare. So here we have the verse in chapter 20, verse 19. Ki satsur al ir, yamim rabim lehilachem aleh lesofsa. When in your war against a city, you have besieged it a long time in order to capture it. Lo sashkes es eitza, lendoyach alav garzon. Ki mimenu soichel va'oisei lo sichos. You must not destroy its trees wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you into the besieged city? Meaning to say, when you catch a human being who is part of the enemy and did not hide in the city, well, then you might capture them. You might torture them if you didn't sign on to the Geneva Convention to make them tell about the city and the ways, the ins and outs, and all that sort of thing. You might deprive them of food, of water, until they come over to your side and assist you. But that's a human being. Is a tree a human being that you would expect it to be in the siege? And if it's not in the siege, you would punish it? No, obviously not. The tree is not a human being, and it didn't do anything wrong, and there's nothing the tree can help you with. So you should not cut it down. This is a Torah violation, by the way, because when it comes to cutting down a fruit tree outside of a city that you're besieging, you might argue and say, well, I'm cutting it down for a reason, because I want to teach the enemy a lesson. Even so, the Torah says, no, you cannot cut down a fruit tree. Fruit tree is beneficial to the world, and it's forbidden to cut it down. That's considered bal tashchis. It's wasteful. Like your mother may have told you when you didn't finish the food on your plate, the children are starving in Africa. How could you not finish the food on your plate? Of course, whether or not you finish the food on your plate, the children that are starving elsewhere are still going to be starving. But her point is we should appreciate what we have and not waste it, because it is in fact precious. Maybe you don't consider it precious, but it really is precious. So the fruit tree is a precious item. It's not to be taken lightly, and it's not to just be destroyed. This is one of the 365 negative commandments, to not cut down a fruit tree. If you ever have a fruit tree growing in your lawn, your backyard, and you want to redesign things, you want to move things around, you want to change things up a little bit, you can't cut the fruit tree down. It's actually a Torah violation. Not a simple violation either. The Gemara says that there was a son of a great rabbi, the son of Rav Chizda, I think it was, who cut down a fruit tree, and unfortunately his son died. And it was seen as a punishment for that, because the fruit tree is compared to a man, as we see in this verse. And cutting down a fruit tree can almost be considered to some degree like disturbing a person's life. Now, in the simple reading of the verse, by the way, the Torah is not comparing a fruit tree to a man. On the contrary, just the opposite. The Torah is saying, "V'chi ha'adam eitz hasoda," is a man like a fruit tree, that you would expect fruit trees to be in the siege, and if they're out of the siege, you're going to punish them? No, of course not. So what are you doing? Don't punish the fruit tree. So in the simple reading of the text, there is actually not a comparison. It's just the opposite. Nevertheless, the Talmud does indicate that the Torah is comparing man to a fruit tree. And the way that this works is because the wording of the text could have been reversed. Instead of saying, Ki ha'adam eitz hasoda, is man a fruit tree, it should have said just the opposite. V'chi eitz hasoda hu adam, is the fruit tree a man? That would have been the normal question to ask. Why are you punishing the fruit tree? Is the fruit tree a man? The answer is no. But the verse doesn't say that. The verse says, is man like a fruit tree? So changing the expected order, and therefore can also be interpreted to mean that there is a comparison of man and a fruit tree. So that's going to be the topic of this class. What exactly is the meaning of the comparison of man and a fruit tree? Now, of course, there are many comparisons that we can come up with. And I'll just mention one that the Lubavitcher Rebbe says before we study the Gemara that discusses this matter. So first of all, when it comes to a tree, it's great and tall, and it has branches and leaves and fruit, and it's so wonderful. But just remember how it all started. It started with a small little seed. That's it, just a little seed. And you planted it, and you took care of it, and slowly, slowly, the seed grew and grew until it became the tree that it is today. And this is really to teach a lesson about the importance of educating our children. They start out like a small seed, and they're almost like whatever, they're just like, I don't want to say the word nuisances, but demanding a lot of attention as kids do, kind of getting in the way. And you don't realize, don't pay attention, this little person is going to grow up one day to be a very great person if you treat them accordingly, if you nourish them spiritually, emotionally, physically, if you give them the right care. And God forbid, the opposite is also true. If you damage a tree when it's young or when it's still not yet planted, the seed might not grow, might grow crooked, might not produce the fruit you need it to produce, and so on. So very important to take care of the youth. And then, of course, we have the roots of the tree. Without the roots, the tree is gone. When you used to drive on Pine Tree Drive, south of 41st Street, I don't know if anybody of you are on Miami Beach, you used to drive over the roots of those big trees in the center divider. And the past few years, they got rid of the roots. They dug them up and they cut them out. And even though it's a machaya to drive now, no more bumps, I always worry, like when I'm passing those trees, like without roots, like how are we sure they're so strong? But anyway, the roots are what keeps the tree strong. And we, the Jewish people, have our roots. And our roots are the Torah and our connection to Hashem and our belief in Hashem and our devotion to Him. And that's what gives us nourishment, our spiritual nourishment, which is what we need to thrive in this world.
Rabbi?
Yes.
What about the vines, grapevines, and what about bushes like blueberry bushes like that, which are not considered they're adamah, they're not considered except for grapes. The it's ha'etz, if it's a tree, then obviously what you're saying. But how does it apply to grapes and bushes?
So grapes are considered a
Blueberry.
tree, halachically. The definition of a tree, it does not have to be like a tall, powerful sequoia tree or a cedar or a pine, as long as it has a trunk, meaning to say a main branch that lasts from year to year and does not die out every year, and the branches come from that trunk from which fruits grow, that is considered halachically a tree, regardless of how how thick the trunk is, how tall it grows, and so on. So that's why vines are considered a tree, and grapes are ha'etz, and actually blueberries are also trees, because the blueberry bushes, even though they're a bush, but a bush is a tree.
Why do we then
A bush is a
distinguish?
tree. I'm sorry?
Why do we distinguish when we say the bracha, we say berei pri, adama,
No,
berei pri?
no. You gotta get a better brachas book. The brachas books that I have say that a blueberry is ha'etz. Strawberries are ha'adama because they actually don't have a trunk. They grow in like little bushes on the ground, and there's no trunk that lasts from year to year. The root lasts from year to year, and a new stem comes up, but there's no trunk that lasts from year to year with strawberries. But blueberries should be ha'etz. Check it up again.
I think that the rule is all berries are ha'etz except for strawberries.
I'm not 100% sure of that. I'm not sure about raspberries. I don't eat raspberries anyway because there's infestation issues, but I think raspberries are questionable. And cranberries, I think, are also questionable if they grow very close to the ground.
Blueberries are ha'etz with a bar in the flushos afterwards.
Thank you very much.
And the other one was cranberries. And I'm looking at I Bless Food, which is a database for the phone. Cranberry juice, cranberry sauce, unstrained cranberry sauce is ha'etz with a bar in the flushos.
Look under berries.
Okay,
It
yeah,
says,
cranberries
pretty sure
do
it
have the
says berries.
characteristics of a tree.
Cranberry sauce is a shahako with a bar in the flushos.
Cranberries, there are different opinions about cranberries.
Cranberry juice is shahako.
Well, yeah, the juice of all fruits are alcohol besides grape juice.
All the
But
other
cranberries are questionable. They have the characteristics of a tree, but they grow close to the ground, so some say they're hadama. But anyway, what did I want to say? Oh yes, and then you have the tree itself. The tree is constantly growing and never stops growing as long as it's alive. Another ring every year. And this is a lesson for us here. I'm going to mute you all, but you're welcome to unmute yourselves as needed. So a fruit tree, a tree grows, and we have to learn to always be growing and never to stop growing. Always have new projects, always have new goals. Somebody messaged me today, and he gave me a whole drasha about he thinks his soul is rooted in Chachma and Netzach and a whole Kabbalistic rant. And that's why he starts projects and he never finishes them. And he wants my sage opinion about how to rectify himself. And I said, with all due respect, I don't know what your soul is rooted in, but we all start projects and we very often don't finish them. That's part of just human nature. You get excited about something and you try it and you don't necessarily follow through, and it's something we have to work on. But at least you should try. The answer is not to just not start new projects and say, well, I'm not going to stop halfway, so I'm not even going to start. No, it's the month of Elul. You got to make new projects. You got to have new ideas. You got to have new goals, new books you want to read, holy books, hopefully, new people you want to help, new ideas, new things to make the world a better place and yourself a better person. Don't give up. And if you only accomplish half the project, okay, at least you did a half. If you did a tenth, you did a tenth. Don't give up. And then, of course, that's not enough, because if it's a fruit tree, if you have the roots and you have the trunk and you have the leaves, but you don't have the fruit, then that's a disappointment. You got to have the fruit. I have an avocado tree in my backyard. Nebuch, it doesn't have a shidduch, and it's given us like maybe 10 avocados in the 23 years we're here. So that's a little bit of a disappointment, because a fruit tree is supposed to grow fruits. That's the whole point. And what we are supposed to do is give benefit to others and to the world. That's what the fruit represents, something that others can eat, others can plant, make more trees, and so on. So this is one reason to compare us to a tree with all these comparisons. Now let's study the Gemara that takes it a little bit further. Highness 7a. Ormalei Rav Yirmiyah Rav Zera. Rav Yirmiyah said to Rav Zera, Lacey Mar Lisni, can you please give us a drasha? We want a shear. Amalei, he said, Chalash li boy v'lo yechilna. My heart is weak, and I'm not up to it. Lema mar milsa da agadata. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asked his teacher Rab Zera to teach him something from Agadata, some lesson, some moral lesson, if he didn't have strength for an in-depth halacha shir. Amrle, he said to him, Hachim Rabbi Yochanan, and this is what Rabbi Yochanan says. My dixiv, what's the meaning of the pasuk? Ki ha'adam eitz hasoda, because man is like the tree of a field. Ki ha'adam eitz hasodahu. Really? Is man like the tree of a field? What does that mean? And again, we said, the commentaries explain that the fact that the verse reverses the order, and it doesn't say is a tree like a man, but rather is a man like a tree, that order teaches us that it also does mean that that a man is like a tree. But what does it mean that a man is like a tree? So here's the answer that Rav Zera gives, Elamishum Dixiv, because the pasuk says, Kimi menu soichal v'oisei, from it you should eat, and it you should not cut off. That's what we said in the verse above. V'chsiv, and the second pasuk just after this one, which I didn't quote, but the second pasuk, the second verse says, Oisoi Sashkis v'charota. Yes, that one you should destroy and cut off. The next verse talks about non-fruit trees. A non-fruit tree, if you know that a tree is not a fruit tree, the verse says, you are allowed to destroy it and cut it off. So what is that referring to in terms of human beings? Haketz and how so? Im Talmud Chacham Hagunhu, if he is a Torah scholar that is proper. Proper means not just that he knows Torah, but that he's proper in his behavior. He's somebody you look up to, a moral person, an honest person, a nice and a kind person. Mimenu soichel, from him you should eat. You should study from him. He should be your teacher. V'oisoi loy sichrois, and him you should not cut off. Do not disconnect yourself from such a teacher. Connect yourself to him. Learn from him. V'im lav, but if not, if the teacher is a Torah scholar, but he's not somebody that behaves in the proper manner, him you should destroy and cut off. Now, this doesn't literally mean you destroy him. We try not to destroy people. What it means is you should completely cut yourself off from him. You should not study from such a person, because we learn mostly from example, mostly by what people do, not by what they say. So if you have a teacher that's not behaving in a moral manner and you're studying from him, that is going to have an impact on your behavior. Now, Tosfos discusses the case of Rab Meir and Acher. Everybody heard about Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, a great Torah scholar who unfortunately went off the path. And he became a heretic, and he ended up doing major sins. And he was no longer quoted by the sages. And if he was, they would quote him by the term Acher, the other one, because they didn't want to mention his name. He was such a bad guy. Yet, he had one student whose name was Rabbi Meir. He's the famous Rabbi Meir. He's the most often quoted person in the Mishnah. Not actually quoted, but his opinion is the one that is the one stated in the Mishnah most often. If the Mishnah doesn't have a name, and we don't know the author who's writing it, whose opinion it is, we assume it's Rab Meir. So he's a major player in the oral Torah. Rab Meir continued to study with Acher. And the Gemara questions this, because there's another verse similar to this one that compares a teacher, a Torah teacher, to a Malach Hashem, to an angel of Hashem. And it says, if your teacher is like an angel of Hashem, Torah yivakshu mipihu, then you should study Torah from him. But if he's not, then you should not. And the Gemara asks how Rab Meir was able to continue studying from Acher, who was very far from an angel of Hashem at that time. And the Gemara says, Godol Shaini, a great person is different. Rab Meir was such a great person that he was able to discern and accept the positive teachings that Acher said without being influenced by the negative behavior that he exhibited. Even so, the sages of that generation were not happy with Rab Meir, and for this reason, they quoted Rab Meir after he continued to learn from Acher, and they gave him the title Acherim. Acherim oimrim, others say. And sometimes we quote Rab Meir, sometimes we quote Acherim, but Acherim refers to Rab Meir, and they say that Rab Meir is what his real name is, but when the sages were upset that he continued to study from Acher, so from then on they referred to him as Acherim, as the other one, the one who studied from Acher, basically. So the Rebbe questions the question of this Gemara. What's so hard to understand when it says that man is compared to a tree? Yeah, there are many comparisons that man can be compared to a tree. We just gave a whole bunch of them. So why is it so difficult to understand? And why is it that this is the explanation, that there are some Torah scholars that you can study from and others that you... Sorry, can you hear me? So I was cut off for a second there.
Yes.
Some Torah scholars you can study from and some you cannot. How does that answer the question exactly and resolve the issue when it seems like a kind of a minor detail? Torah scholar, good behaved, bad behaved. I mean, is this why man in general is compared to a tree? Because of a Torah scholar, whether you should learn from him or not? I mean, why is that such a general thing? Why would you call a person a tree just because there are some comparisons? And there are many comparisons. But to call him by that title as if That's what he is. That's more than just a comparison. That's something very deep. So what exactly is the Talmud trying to get at? Yes, David, go ahead.
I have a question of the answer to the question in the Torah is no. The Torah is asking, like, why are you going to cut down a fruit tree? You're fighting a person in an army that's the other side, the opposing enemy.
Exactly.
And the answer is no. There's a person like a tree, and the answer is no. But we're trying to learn a lesson to say that a person is like a tree, even though the answer to the question is no, a person is not like a tree.
Exactly. All right, my friends. So we have to introduce you to the system of drash. Drash means how you take something in the Chumash, in the Tanakh, or even later in the Mishnah, and you interpret it non-literally to mean something else, perhaps even the exact opposite of what it says. I'll give you another example. It says in Pirkei Avos, the 5th chapter, the 1st Mishnah, Ba'asara ma'amoros nivra ha'olam. With 10 utterances, the world was created. V'haloi b'maimer echad yachol lehibaros, but it could have been created with one. Ella, but lihipar min arshaim shema'abdim masa'olam shenivra basar ma'amoros, v'litin sachater l'tzadikim shemekayim masa'olam shenivra basar ma'amoros. To punish the wicked who destroy a wall that was created with 10 utterances, and to reward the righteous who established the world that was created with 10 utterances. Okay, so how many utterances was the world created with?
Ten.
All right, that's what you would think. But here's how Chassidus explains the Mishnah in a way of drush. With 10 utterances, the world was created. But with one utterance, it was created in a potential form. Statement, not question. Not but it could have been created with one utterance. No. But with one utterance, it was created in a potential form. And the correct answer to the question is it was created with one utterance in a potential form, and then it was expanded into the way we have it today with 10 utterances. And that's what the Ramban says, that when Hashem said Bereshis, Hashem created all of the matter from which the world would later be formed. And then when he said the other 9, he formed that matter into what we have today as the world. So we take the Mishnah completely out of the simple pshat, and we give it a drash. Here's another example. One of my favorite. We read on Tisha B'Av the Megillah Alecha, in which we say quite a shocking pasuk. Nafla v'lo yisosef kum b'sulas Yisrael. They have fallen, they will never rise up again, the Jewish people who are like a virgin. That's it. They're done. They've fallen, they're never getting up. Finished. This pasuk is such a terrible curse that David HaMelech declined to use nun in Ashrei. He used Aleph to Taf for Ashrei, right? Aramimcha, B'chol Yoim, Gadol Hashem, right? Every one of the Aleph Beis he used in Ashrei, but when he came to Nun, he couldn't bring himself to write a pasuk with Nun, because Nun had been used for such a terrible curse in Eicha. Well, Eicha wasn't written yet, but he saw that it was going to be used for such a terrible curse. He couldn't bring himself to use it in Ashrei. He left it out. Okay, that's the simple pshat of the pasuk. However, there is another pshat in drush, and this is brought in the Sforim. I don't remember where it's from originally. You ready? Nafla v'loy soisif. Kum basulas Yisrael. They have fallen and they will not continue to fall. Rise up, the Jewish people who are compared to a virgin. You hear? You got to take out the punctuation and put it in the right place. Nafla v'loy soisif. They have fallen and they will not fall again. Kum basulas Yisrael. Rise up, the Jewish people. You hear me?
Rabbi,
Yes.
that's like I don't know if it was in Yehuda. The Torah says that he didn't know her after that, or then it says he didn't cease to know her.
Exactly. Right, but there it's two interpretations, both on the level of pshat. Neither of those interpretations is so radical. But here
Rabbi?
these are pretty radical departures from pshat. But that's called drush. That's what drush is, when we take verses and we interpret them non-literally. But there is still some basis in the pshat for these interpretations. Excuse me, like I mentioned, that the Maharsha says the basis for this drash is the fact that it should have said, "V'chi eitz hasadahu ad," is the tree like a man. That's the normal wording you would expect. And instead it says, "V'chi adam et hasada." So that's why we come up with this idea that we're comparing man to a fruit tree. All right.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is this drush that we were talking about, the previous one, the man will rise?
The Jewish people.
In other words, the
Jewish
opposite drush would be the fact that it's because that was said in order to prevent the Satan from, having an effect on the situation. I mean, I don't know how exactly how to phrase it, but was it reversed for that purpose? I don't know if I'm saying exactly. In other words, to avoid the interference from the Satan, that it was said in that way.
Satan. It has to do with seeing things in a positive light and seeing that our future is bright and not becoming depressed.
No, but the reason why it was, I'm talking about the previous way it was said, the pshat, that the other way it was said. In other words, what if you switch it around, then it becomes uplifting, but before it wasn't. So I'm saying that I'm wondering if it was because that maybe David HaMelech, it was because of the fact that it would attract the Satan, that it would.
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. Okay, so what the Rebbe explains in connection to this Gemara about the comparison to a Talmud Chacham Hagam, a good Torah teacher, by explaining what exactly is the characteristic of a tree that makes it so unique, and what aspect of man can be compared to a tree, and then we can understand why man as a whole is compared to a tree. But first, an interesting idea, which you may not pay attention to, and that is that we celebrate Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for trees. What does it mean it's the Rosh Hashanah for trees? Trees are not judged on Tu B'Shvat, by the way. Don't make that mistake. People are judged on Rosh Hashanah, but trees are not judged on Tu B'Shvat. Trees are actually judged on Shavuos, which is why in some shuls they bring trees into shul on Shavuos. So we should daven that the trees should be blessed and whatever. When we say that Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for trees, we mean that as far as counting the years for the tithes, there are different tithes for different years. So depending on when the produce was either harvested or when it grew, depending on the type of produce, it goes by Tu B'Shvat. If it's before Tu B'Shvat, it belongs to the previous year. If it's after Tu B'Shvat, it's the next year. Not grains and vegetables, but trees. So that's what it means when we say it's the Rosh Hashanah for trees. So Tu B'Shvat is a day that is celebrated. Besides the fact that they plant trees in Israel and they make, parties, whatever, that's all nice. But I'm talking about in halacha, in Jewish law. Tu B'Shvat is recognized in Jewish law as a mini holiday, and we don't say Tachnun on that day because it's a mini holiday. And that's because we are compared to trees. So if it's a Rosh Hashanah for trees, it's a mini celebration for us too. Now, if the comparison between us and trees is just like a little footnote, just a little cute comparison, yeah, we have roots, we have fruit, we have seeds, whatever. It's like a nice bar mitzvah drasha or a nice Shabbos drasha that the rabbi gives. But it's just, kind of general, but not like deep. Well, then why would we say it's a holiday and we're not going to say Tachlin on that day? If we're celebrating it, if the Torah recognizes that we're celebrating it, obviously there's a deep connection between mankind and trees. And if it's a holiday for trees, it's something relevant for man as well. Okay, so what's unique about trees is that they grow and they remain connected to their source. Animals, people, we also grow, but we are not connected to our source. Our original source was earth. When Hashem created animals, he took the dust of the earth to create them. When he created man, the same. When he created birds, he actually took a mixture of earth and water, so it was like mud. But we're not connected to earth anymore. And of course, we're all born of our mothers, and that's it. You cut the cord, and you're free. You're no longer connected. You eat food that is also not connected to its source either. You get nourished from things that are no longer connected to the ground. When it comes to trees, trees are connected to their source. They are created from the ground. They grow with the power that Hashem has invested in the ground to grow things. And they remain connected to that source for as long as they're alive. Of course, if you cut them down, they're not connected, but then they're not growing anymore. For as long as they're growing, they are connected to their source. And they are nourished from nourishments that are in their source. All of their nourishment they get from the roots, which gets its nourishment from the ground. So you'll say, what about fish? The Jewish people are also compared to fish, The famous story when Rabbi Akiva was in jail because he had been caught teaching Torah at a time that the Romans had decreed that it was forbidden to teach Torah. And there was another man who was in prison with him. His name was Papas ben Yehuda. And that man asked him, why did you teach Torah when it was so dangerous? You could be killed. And Rabbi Akiva said, well, we're like the fish in the river. The fox says, come out of the river, I have a little cave, I'll protect you, and you won't have to run away from the fishermen. And they say, foolish fox, here at least we have a chance. If we're out of the water, we have no chance. So Rabbi Akiva says the Torah is our life. If we disconnect ourselves from the Torah, we're finished. So the Romans, maybe they'll kill us, maybe not. Unfortunately, Rabbi Akiva was killed, but his Torah lives on, his students, their students, and here we are today. So we're also compared to fish. The difference between fish and trees is, why isn't everybody calls me now when I'm in Little Shear? They should know better. Sorry. So the difference between trees and fish is that the fish remain in their source. They never leave their source. Maybe the flying fish leave for a few seconds and the dolphins jump up and whatever. But more or less, the fish stay in their source. And yeah, they remain in their source, but they're submerged in it. They're not separate from it at all. What's unique about a tree is that it grows out of the source. It grows up, doesn't grow down. It's not in the ground anymore. It's pretty big and pretty tall, but at the same time, it's connected to its source. So that's a unique thing, that it grows out of the source, but it's still connected to the source. So what does this all have to do with man? So man, we have different character traits, different soul powers. One of our soul powers is our intellect. The fact that we are smart, hopefully, and we can think, and we can understand things. The thing about intellect and understanding is that it's not limited to one kind of understanding. Human beings can be open to all kinds of ideas. You don't have to stay in your lane of thinking. A truly open-minded person can listen and understand somebody else's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. You can understand it as an intellectual exercise, right? It's a big problem we have here in America where everything is so polarized. Like if you speak to the Trumpers, like anybody who supports Kamala Harris is like crazy, and vice versa, because everybody is so much in their lane that they have like blinders on, like everybody else is crazy. But really, a true intellectual is not that way. They understand there are different perspectives, and I'm going to make my choice, and I have a reason for my choice. But there is value in the other opinion. I don't agree with it, but I don't denigrate it and pretend that it has no value. So this is what is the power of intellect. And that's why we say that it's comparable to an animal which moves around on the ground. It's not connected to its source. It's not limited. It's more versatile. It's open to change, right? The birds, they go in one season, they go here, they come back there. The fish, they go off for years. They come back to their spawning grounds where they were born to have their babies. They're versatile. They move around. They're not stuck in one place. And that's like our intellect that is free to wander and to think different thoughts and not to be only stuck in one mindset. And then there are our emotions, our feelings. Those are much more difficult to change. People have certain character traits. And of course, as they grow older and more mature, they develop those character traits and they don't remain immature and childish. But nevertheless, most often, they have the same traits. When they're young, they're middle-aged, and then they're older, they more or less have the same traits, whether it's kindness, whether it's humility, whether it's empathy, or maybe just the opposite. Maybe some people are a little bit more harsh, a little bit more arrogant, a little bit less empathetic, and whatnot. That's not to say that you cannot change your character. In fact, there is a famous teaching from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe that the whole concept of Hasidus, of Hasidic thought, is Leshanos Teva Midosav, to change the nature of our emotions. That's really what we're supposed to be doing here in this world, to change the way we feel. And if we have bad character traits, to change them. But that's a big effort. That's almost like digging up a tree from its roots where it's planted and replanting it elsewhere, which could be done and could be done successfully. And maybe it could even grow better in the next place, but it's a very big effort. It's not a simple matter. So that is the comparison of man to a tree. Our emotions, which grow and develop over the course of our lives, like a tree that grows, but our emotions are very deeply rooted in our souls. The way we feel, the type of emotions that we have are very deeply rooted in our soul. They're not like the intellect that we can use to understand different kind of ideas, but the way we feel is very much connected to our soul. And now we come back to understand why mankind is compared to a tree specifically. Because the main accomplishment of man is not to be an intellectual and not to just understand deep concepts, go to philosophy classes and, come up with great theories and great ideas. That's not what it's about. What we're supposed to accomplish in this world is to really work on our midos, work on our character, work on how we treat other people, how we feel about other people, how we feel about ourselves, and so on. This is our life's work. And this is what the pasuk says, that if it's a fruit tree, you should not cut it down. You should consume those fruits. And if it's not a fruit tree, you should destroy it and cut it down. And the Gemara says that this is referring to the Talmud Chacham, who is either Hagun or not Hagun, the Torah scholar who is either proper or not proper. What makes a Torah scholar a real worthy Torah scholar? Not the fact that he knows the whole Talmud or the whole code of Jewish law or all the commentaries or all the opinions. No. What makes him a true outstanding Torah scholar is that he doesn't just know it, but he lives it. He's a Talmud Chacham Hagun. He's a proper Talmud Chacham in his behavior. Then that's somebody you emulate, because that's what a tree is. The tree is rooted to its source, and it's faithful to its source. And that's what we are here to do and to accomplish, to fix those midos, those character traits which are compared to a tree and are rooted in our soul, and make them hagun, make them proper, and not, God forbid, the opposite, improper, which is what the Talmud, who is not, Talmud Chacham was not proper, and that's the one that you cut down and you stay away from, because he is not accomplishing what he's supposed to be accomplishing in this world. The whole purpose of being here is to work on our character. And if your teacher is not a person who is perfecting his character, then he's not a proper teacher. He's not accomplishing what he was created to accomplish. So, coming back to understanding the comparison to a tree, the Rebbe says, most of us are not remaining connected to our source throughout the day. The source is Hashem. And most of us don't stay in yeshiva and in shul, davening and praying all day. Most of us go out and we make a living and we do what we do. Maybe we go to the gym, maybe we go hang out with friends, and hopefully we also have Torah classes. Rabbi Smith has wonderful Torah classes, and so on and so forth. But most of our day, we're outside of the roots, so to speak. Yet at the same time, we must remain connected to those roots. We must live with the lessons that we learn from those roots, from the Torah classes that we do have, from the years perhaps that we studied in yeshiva. The lessons that we learned then, they shouldn't be disconnected from us. We shouldn't have the attitude, that's what they taught me in yeshiva. But now I'm living in the real world, and now it's different. No, that's not what it is. What they taught you in yeshiva is how you should be living. And that's the lesson of a tree. You can grow out into the wider world, you can accomplish, you can do big things, but remain connected to your roots and bring that connection out in everything that you do. All right. No, any questions, comments?
Give us a 2-minute takeaway.
2-minute takeaway. So we are compared to a tree, and the comparison to a tree especially applies to the emotions of a human being. The intellect is compared to a living animal that moves around, because intellect can change and can have different ideas, but the emotion is really what's most constant within our personalities, our character traits. And what we have to accomplish in this world is to grow those emotions in a positive way, which is why we're compared to a tree. That's our main accomplishment in this world, to perfect our character, to become good people. And that's why you study from a teacher who works on himself and who has good character, and not from a person that doesn't. And that's also why we're compared to a tree, because even when we go out into the wider world, we must remain connected to our roots, which is the Torah and Hashem, just like the tree that grows very tall, but at the same time continues to be nourished from its roots.
What about the ability for a person to change? Like up until now, he was living the opposite of that, and now he wants to try to do what you're saying. How does a person
Right? So very
do
often,
that, or what can a person learn from this relationship between a person and a tree to accomplish that?
right. So very often the person does have good character that's kind of been covered over, and he hasn't been utilizing it. So he has to really dig into himself and uncover that. But even a person who does not have such a good character by nature, he could still change. That's what we were saying, that a tree could be dug up and replanted elsewhere. And that takes a big effort. If a person recognizes that he has some character traits that are really flawed, and he has to really change them, then he has to put in that effort to make that change. But it is a big effort, and he has to be willing to do that. Okay, my friends, I wish you a good day and a good Shabbos coming up.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Rabbi. Have a good Shabbos.
You
Good
too.
Shabbos, everybody.
Best.